Hi, my name is Jill Fisk. I work at Kentucky State University's School of Aquaculture, and today we're going to go over total suspended solids, volatile suspended solids, otherwise known as TSS, VSS. This is part of our water quality that we measure on our saltwater shrimp research. It is a 4-day process, and we're going to cover process 1 today. We measure total suspended solids. It gives us an idea of all of the particles that are suspended within the water column. We'll strain them through a filter and collect their weights. And then the volatile suspended solids, we put that in a Muffler Furnace that burns everything off except for carbon, and that gives us an idea of what is volatile within that system. And so this gives us an idea of the microbial populations that are in our tank. We're generally running biofloc systems, and so we're culturing nitrification within the tank. And so we'll have Nitrosomonas, Nitrobacter, and various microbial populations that are present in saltwater systems. So this just gives us an idea of what may be available for the shrimp as they do feed on the biofloc particles. So if you take a look, we're working with a Millipore today. On the inside of it, we have space that we can put test tubes, 15 ml test tubes. We're not going to use those today, but one of the things we check, we have 2 O-rings, an outer ring and an inner ring. We want to make sure those are properly seated. And the Millipore has 2 pieces, the filtering apparatus and the wells. And so we're going to set the filtering apparatus in. It lines up on the grooves, as you can see here. And so once we have that lined up, today our process is to prepare new filters. So we're using glass filters with a 0.45 micrometer pore space. And we're going to, because these are fiberglass, we use forceps to handle them. And we will put 1 filter on each of the areas here, making sure that we're covering this filtered area completely. So oftentimes these filters tend to stick together, so it's a little bit tedious to make sure you're only getting 1 filter. Okay, we're just going to double check that real quick. Once we know our filters are on there properly, we'll take the top piece. Again, it has, that nestles in. We'll carefully set this down so we don't create any air that can displace those filters. And then we'll screw this nut down pretty tightly. It helps us maintain a good vacuum. And this initial process, thank you. This initial process, we're using a pipette, and we're going to pass 10 milliliters of distilled water through these filters. And what that's going to do is rinse the filter of any possible contaminants. And so we'll put 10 mLs in each of these wells. So it is pretty important to have accuracy in pipetting, and so when you're pipetting samples, you always want to keep a little bit of pressure on the top of the plunger so you can control the uptake of it. And once you draw your liquid in, you'll raise that against whatever glassware you're using to pull away any liquid that may be on the outside of that tip, which could alter your accuracy. Ultimately, it can alter the accuracy of your results. And so the calculations for TSS VSS are done after the process of collecting the dry weights and the combusted weights. And that calculation, for TSS, the calculation, we'll take initial weight of our filters, and then we'll pass our tank water through the filter and put it in the drying oven, and then we will collect dry weights of the sample. And the total suspended solids calculation is the dry weights minus the initial weights by 1,000 for our purposes, because we're using 10 milliliters. So your formula is based on the volume of water you're passing through that sample, and it changes based on your research. So at this time I'm going to turn the pump on, and we'll start our vacuuming process, and you can watch it get drawn through the wells. And once the filters are completely empty and slightly dried, we'll turn the pump off. And at this point we can take the nut off, and we'll carefully lift up the top portion. Occasionally filters will stick. They didn't this time, so we're okay to take this off. And so this contraption is called a desiccator. It is a very heavy glass unit. It has a desiccant in the bottom that pulls all moisture out of your samples. So we use this piece of equipment for TSS, VSS. You always want to keep this lid closed unless you're loading or unloading samples. So we'll take the lid off, and at this point we haven't measured anything, so it's okay to handle your glassware. And because we're running TSS, VSS right now with other samples where we have our ceramic crucibles in use, we're going to do this first step in Pyrex dishes, which is perfectly fine until you take your initial weight. Once you take your initial weight, they have to remain in the same crucible throughout the process. So I'm just going to use either the edge of the forceps to get underneath that filter, and I'm just going to load these up. And these are the filters that we're going to use in our next step to pass the tank water through. Right, I'll put the lid back on that, but I'm not going to put the lid all the way on because I have wet filters. And we're going to put them in the oven soon. I'm going to repeat this because we need 24 samples. We're running a trial right now with 24 shrimp tanks, and so we have 24 samples to run TSS VSS on. Okay. So at this point all of our filters have been rinsed with distilled water, and we're going to load them into a Muffler Furnace, which is this piece of equipment. This is a Vulcan A1750 Muffler Furnace. We are operating at 550 degrees centigrade. That's roughly 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So we do have gloves that will protect us up to 1,000 degrees centigrade. Very critical. You don't want third-degree burns. And we have some long forceps that we're going to load in. And so the first step, we'll open the oven up. You want to take a shot inside that oven. It is very hot. And it's ceramic on the insides to maintain that heat. And we're just going to load these plates in, being careful not to drop them or have them leaning up against the sides of the Muffler Furnace, which could increase the temperature and maybe melt the fiberglass. So they're inside the oven now. We're going to go ahead and drop this door down. At this point, we're going to let the temperature get back up to 550 C, at which time we'll set a timer for 60 minutes, and we will burn all of the contaminants off of the filters. When that process is finished, we'll take them and put them back into the desiccator, and then when we're ready to run our water quality, we just need to take our initial weights and then pass our tank water through. And this method is based on ESS, Standard Water Quality Methods, and we modified it a little bit to suit our situation better. We increased the Muffler Furnace time from 30 minutes to 60 minutes. We found that gives us more consistent results. And the method recommends at least 1 hour in the desiccator. Again, we found better and more consistent results if we allow that to sit overnight in the desiccator.